Since Monarch Legacy of Monsters tells the story of two different timelines and constantly jumps back and forth between the two, I'm going to be summarizing each timeline separately, starting off with the timeline that primarily took place in the 1950s. In 1952, Lee Shaw, an army lieutenant stationed in the Philippines, is assigned to security detail for a Japanese scientist named Keiko Miura. Keiko informs Lee that she's been sent to find the source of strange radiation detected in the area. While in the jungle, they run into a young Bill Randa who's investigating the same radiation readings they are. Bill believes the radiation is coming from a dragon from the island's folklore, a dragon that's said to carve a path of fire in the sky, or in this case, ionized radiation. Keiko thinks it's a good idea that Bill joins them, but Shaw thinks otherwise. After the two get into an argument, Shaw leaves as Keiko and Bill trek further into the jungle where they come across the wreckage of the USS Lawton. Bill explains that he was on the ship when it mysteriously sunk in 1943 200 miles west of Pearl Harbor, and that he was the sole survivor. Meanwhile, while driving back to port, Shaw sees a trail of radiation in the sky and turns back to warn Bill and Keiko. As Bill and Keiko push forward, they discover the ship is covered in a viscous slime and find the bodies of Bill's fellow sailors preserved inside. While looking for an exit, the ship begins to shake violently as an unseen titan is attempting to break free. As Bill gets pinned under a piece of debris, Shaw arrives just in time to help them, and the group narrowly manages to escape. A winged monster called the Ion Dragon breaches the ship, leaving the group in shock by what they're seeing. 2 years later, Bill, Keiko, and Shaw are all working for Monarch and present a finding to Lee's superior, General Puckett, in an effort to keep the organization funded. They reveal a cast of a footprint left behind by Godzilla, leaving Puckett in disbelief. Lee informs him that they can lure the creature that left the footprint out into the open if they were granted access to 150 pounds of uranium, and with a little convincing, Puckett agrees to supply it. Sometime later on Bikini Atoll, Keiko and Bill are shocked to see the uranium they asked for has come in the form of a nuclear bomb, and that it's clear the army intends to kill Godzilla instead of giving them the chance to study it. Hours go by and the army becomes impatient as Godzilla has yet to appear, but suddenly the sonar picks up movement and he begins to rise from the ocean. The countdown begins, and in an act of desperation, Keiko attempts to sabotage the mission to spare Godzilla's life. Knowing their funding will be cut if she succeeds, Lee stops her and the bomb goes off, appearing to have successfully killed Godzilla. Later, Lee informs Keiko and Bill that they've received a blank check to fund Monarch. Considering that Puckett is so quick to want to eliminate potential findings, Keiko suggests they should keep some things a secret from him. Lee is apprehensive about this, but agrees just as long as secrets kept from Puckett are also kept from him, as he is obligated to tell the general everything he knows. 1 year later, Bill and Keiko are in Japan meeting with Dr. Suzuki, a scientist who has been picking up isotopic signatures and in turn has invented a machine that simulates gamma radiation, and the two theorize that they can use it to lure out the source of the signature readings. Driven by his growing love for Keiko, Shaw abandons his responsibilities to attend a budget meeting with his higher-ups and follows the two to Japan. Shaw and Keiko discuss their feelings for each other and share a kiss, but are soon interrupted by the destruction of the gamma simulator. Suddenly, Godzilla rises from the water, revealing that he wasn't killed by the nuclear bomb blast, much to Shaw's shock and Keiko's relief. The group returns to Monarch HQ in a heated debate. Keiko protests to keep Godzilla's survival a secret from Puckett, fearing that the army will just try to kill him again, but Shaw says he can't present to the general empty-handed, especially since he neglected his responsibilities to attend the budget meeting. They suddenly find out that in Shaw's absence, Puckett has handed over operational control to Navy Colonel Hatch, who demands a full report on their findings since Castle Bravo. The group does, but leave out the fact that Godzilla survived, and Hatch begins to question the existence of Titans and Monarch's ability to find them, stating that he believes the organization is wasting money that should be used against the threat of the Soviet Union. Afterwards, Keiko states that Hatch will undoubtedly write a report for an upcoming budgetary meeting that will make Monarch look bad, leading to the organization being shut down. Shaw still thinks they should come clean about Godzilla, but Keiko says that'll just lead to bigger and worse weapons being created, to which Shaw says that'll happen regardless with the Cold War going on. He then tells them to compile everything Monarch knows and has found out about Titans since the sinking of the Lawton, and to build a map of confirmed Titan sightings and projections of where one might pop up next. While constructing the map, Bill comes to the realization that Titans avoid detection by moving underground through passageways that could possibly lead to another realm within the Earth. He shares this theory with Keiko, who, while thinking it's crazy, also thinks it's brilliant. Bill also discovers that Keiko is a widow, secretly raising her son Hiroshi, and he offers to adopt him so she won't have to raise him alone and face the ridicule of being a widowed single mother. Shaw presents Bill and Keiko's findings to an aggravated Puckett who refuses to take them. Realizing he's out of options, Shaw reveals that Godzilla is still alive, and once it's clear that Puckett believes him, Shaw emphasizes the importance of Bill and Keiko being recognized as the ones who provided the documents and not Hatch, so that they can keep their positions at Monarch. Fast forward to 1959, the three travel to Kazakhstan to investigate radiation readings in the surrounding areas of an abandoned power plant. They find that the radiation levels drop to zero as they get closer to the plant, and after using seismic charges, discover massive chambers in the bedrock underneath. As they make their way inside, they come across a massive cluster of eggs containing creatures called endoswarmers. Keiko and Shaw rappel down into the nest to collect a sample, but suddenly the ground begins to split open and the endoswarmers start to hatch. As Bill tries to pull up Keiko, the endoswarmers overwhelm her, causing Bill to lose his grip on the rope, sending Keiko falling into a deep pit below. 3 years later, in 1962, Shaw is leading Operation Hourglass, an expedition into the Hollow Earth through a portal discovered in Kansas. Thanks to some exposition from Puckett, we learn that the portal is too unstable and that a Titan would make it safe enough to pass through. Monarch uses a gamma simulator to lure a Titan just enough to stabilize it and then cut off the signal so an emergence doesn't occur. After the expedition team passes through the portal, it becomes unstable and implodes, leaving the team to be presumed dead. Later, Puckett informs Bill that due to the loss of life during the operation, Monarch's funding is being cut, but Bill stubbornly refuses to give up. Puckett urges him to do so for the sake of Hiroshi after now losing both a mother and an uncle. Shaw then wakes up in a Monarch hospital and asks to see Bill, but these requests are constantly ignored. Fed up, he takes a nurse hostage and is met by an adult Hiroshi, who reveals to him that Bill is dead and 20 years have passed. Shaw tells Hiroshi that after they passed through the portal, the team was killed by the Ion Dragon and strange local phenomena, after which Shaw was sucked up into a rift and was found in the woods in Japan. Shaw tells him that Bill was right about everything and that all of his theories were correct, but Hiroshi dismisses it as his father being crazy and expresses that he doesn't want to find answers and forget it ever happened. Shaw is surprised by Hiroshi's apathetic attitude and resentment towards Bill and is sent to a Monarch facility disguised as a retirement home for observation and study where he spends the next 32 years, and it's there where he witnesses the events of G-Day unfold. The second timeline takes place in 2015, 1 year after the Battle of San Francisco. Hiroshi's daughter Kate, a survivor of the attack struggling with PTSD, flies to Japan to settle his affairs when he's presumed dead after a plane he was on went missing in Alaska. She then discovers that he had a second wife, Emiko, the nurse that Shaw held hostage, as well as a second child named Kentaro. Kate proves Hiroshi was her dad by showing them pictures, and then overwhelmed by the situation, decides they should just forget this ever happened and not get any answers. Like father, like daughter, huh? As Kate leaves the apartment, she calls her mom and lies that she didn't find anything, but is suddenly interrupted by a Titan emergence alarm. While in the shelter, she begins to have flashbacks of the events of G-Day, where we learn that she was caught up in the middle of Godzilla's rampage on the Golden Gate Bridge, which claimed the lives of her students. When the all-clear is given, Kentaro brings her to Hiroshi's office where they find a bag of data storage belonging to Bill Randa. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. The show opens with a scene on Skull Island where we see Bill throwing the bag into the ocean and then it's found in 2013 by some fishermen. Anyway, Kate recognizes the logo on the bag and wants to know why Hiroshi has it. Kentaro brings her to his ex-girlfriend May, a freelance coder with a mysterious past who helps them access the data. As May decrypts the files, they find that they're property of Monarch. Kentaro asks what that is, and Kate recalls seeing the logo on some operatives' uniforms during G-Day, and states that they were walking around as if they were anticipating the attack. She then goes on to theorize that Hiroshi might have been working for them, and recalls that after the attack, she briefly reunited with him before he again left her. A week later, Alaskan State Police reported to her and her mother that a bush plane he was on disappeared and the wreckage was never found. Kate decides she's seen all she needs to see until she recognizes a picture of Keiko standing in Godzilla's footprint. The next day, Kentaro returns to Hiroshi's office where he finds a file on Lee Shaw and the retirement home where he's being kept, as well as an old reel of film. He later visits May, asking her if she can play it, but she tells him to leave, still upset about their past relationship, and we see her making digital copies of Bill's files. At the train station, Kate is confronted by Tim, a Monarch agent who is notified to the activation of the data files. Fearing for her life, she attempts to flee, only to be apprehended by Tim's partner, Michelle Duvall. Tim puts a bag over Kate's head, triggering a panic attack and flashbacks to San Francisco, and she kicks Duvall, causing the car to flip and allowing her to escape. She arrives at May's apartment, only to find Tim and Duvall already inside searching for the files. May grabs her before she's seen, and the two sneak away. Meanwhile, Emiko is showing Kentaro old photos of Hiroshi and Shaw, explaining that after his father died, Shaw was the only family Hiroshi had left. They're soon interrupted by Tim and Duvall, who tell her that Kentaro stole the files that belong to them. Sensing the two are acting suspicious, she hands Kentaro a picture of Shaw and signals him to escape. As he pretends to get the files, Tim recognizes a picture of Hiroshi, and the two run after Kentaro but fail to catch him. He meets up with Kate and May, telling them that he knows where to go next. The group travels to the retirement home where Shaw is being held, introducing themselves as Hiroshi's kids. They explain that after G-Day, he mysteriously disappeared, and Shaw is immediately skeptical, thinking there's more to it. May finds a hidden camera and demands to know what this retirement home really is, to which Shaw reveals that it's a Monarch prison in disguise. He then cuts off his ankle monitor and proposes they team up to find out what really happened to Hiroshi, and suggests they start looking in Alaska where his trail went cold. Kate only wants for Monarch to leave her alone, but before she can back out, alarms sound and the group is forced to act. They manage to escape and board a ferry to South Korea to meet with one of Shaw's contacts. While on board, he briefly explains Monarch's history and how it lost its way as an organization, more focused on keeping secrets rather than finding monsters. He also confirms that Hiroshi did in fact work for them, stating that Monarch is like the Randa family business. Before they reach land, they dispose of Bill's files to avoid any potential issues when crossing into South Korea, leaving them only to rely on the digital copies May put on her computer. At the customs office, Shaw poorly attempts to get them into the country, and they are aggressively escorted out by 2 guards, one of which turns out to be Shaw's contact, an old friend named Do-Ho. Back in Japan, Tim and Duval are met by Monarch director Natalia Verdugo, who demands to know why the two went after Bill Randa's files without authorization. Duval gets a call that Shaw was spotted in South Korea, to which Verdugo tells her to form a tactical team to retrieve him. En route to Alaska, May manages to coordinate where Hiroshi was heading, and upon landing, they find the wreckage of Hiroshi's plane, as well as a campsite indicating that he might still be alive. Do-Ho investigates the wreckage further and notices giant claw marks on the side of the plane, and frantically warns the others that they must leave right away. The ground begins to shake as a titan called the Frostvark rises, destroying the plane and killing Do-Ho by freezing him to death. As the group flees, May is injured after falling through a sheet of ice into freezing cold water, but manages not to make any noise to alert the monster to their location. When the Frostvark is gone, the group decides to head for the coast, but Kentaro claims that he saw something from the plane that looked like a structure and thinks that they should go look for it. While on a mountaintop, Kate spots a light in the distance and everyone decides that it's a better idea to head for that instead, all except Kentaro, who stubbornly continues looking for the structure. Back at Monarch HQ, Verdugo is speaking with Dr. Barnes, who has picked up massive gamma spikes coming from Alaska. Dr. Barnes tells her in a panic that this is concerning because spikes like these haven't been seen since G-Day. Kate, May, and Shaw continue searching for the light, with May struggling to battle frostbite on her legs. They discover they've been walking in circles as they find themselves back at Hiroshi's campsite, where they light a fire and May is able to recover. Suddenly, the Frostvark attacks out of nowhere, and when the group sees it consume the campfire, they conclude that the monster feeds on heat. Shaw conducts a plan to burn the plane's remaining fuel to distract it and give them enough time to run for the coast. Meanwhile, Kentaro finds the structure he saw earlier, an abandoned outpost with a working radio inside as well as pencil shavings indicating that Hiroshi was there. Back at the campsite, the Frostvark reappears and begins attacking. As Kate and May try to signal an approaching helicopter, Shaw ignites the lighter fluid, giving them time to get away. The helicopter lands with Kentaro inside and the group makes a narrow escape, and as they fly away, Shaw notices that the light from earlier is a massive Titan portal. When the group lands, they're met by Tim and are detained by Monarch. May is put in a recovery room and visited by Duval, who knows that she's running from something and uses this information to try to persuade her to help Monarch. While May doesn't answer, Duval leaves her a contact card if she changes her mind. As Verdugo and Tim try to figure out what to do with the group, Duval figures that since they won't stop searching for whatever it is they're after, they should let them go while keeping tabs on them. Verdugo agrees but keeps Shaw in custody. May and the Randas are dropped off at the airport, and Kate suggests they continue their search at Hiroshi's office in San Francisco. And while May is hesitant, just wanting to return to her life in Japan, she reluctantly agrees. They stop at Kate's house outside the city, where she breaks the news to her mom Caroline that Hiroshi had a second family and that Kentaro is his son. Since Caroline works with FEMA to recover people's items from the now sealed-off San Francisco, Kate asks her to sneak them into the city to find what else Hiroshi was hiding. Back in Alaska, Verdugo demands Shaw tell her what he found in Bill Randa's files, but he assures her it's nothing that they don't already know. He also berates Monarch for not doing anything to stop G-Day, stating that the organization is a disgrace. May and the Randas make their way through the ruins of San Francisco and arrive at Hiroshi's office, where they find a map on the wall similar to one found in Bill's files. They decipher that the map shows a path going from San Francisco to Alaska and then Africa, which is where they decide to head next. When they reunite with Caroline, Kate reveals to her that Hiroshi is still alive and that he worked for a secret organization that was tasked with hunting monsters. As Kentaro calls his mom, May secretly calls Duval and says that she wants to go home and will do whatever is asked of her. Sometime later, as Shaw is being transported by Monarch Monarch agents, Duval sabotages the convoy and makes an alliance with him. She tells him that her sister Sandra was killed in Jinjira, and that she, along with several other rogue agents, agree with his stance on Monarch and want to take real action against the Titans. They meet with May and the Randas in San Francisco, and Shaw tells them that Duval has switched sides against Monarch and that they need to find Hiroshi, believing that he's trying to prevent a second G-Day. Meanwhile, back in the city, Tim and Verdugo are searching Hiroshi's office looking for clues as to what Kate and Kentaro were looking for. Noticing the holes in the wall, Tim is able to recreate Hiroshi's map and conclude that the Randa kids are looking for him. We also learn that Hiroshi was exiled from Monarch for misuse of satellites meant for targeting deep space cosmic radiation and pointing them towards Earth. Tim pieces together that the points on Hiroshi's map line up with the gamma radiation spikes picked up by Dr. Barnes, and that if they pull up the data on where Hiroshi was redirecting the satellites, they can follow the path that will lead them to where the Randas are heading next. Following the map to Algeria, Shaw, Duval, May, and the Randas find Hiroshi experimenting with a gamma simulator, but instead of being happy to see them, he frantically signals them to run away and quickly leaves in his truck. Subsequently, Tim and other Monarch agents show up in a helicopter, but before they can land, Godzilla rises from the ground, causing the helicopter to crash. As Godzilla leaves the area, Shaw states that they need to find out where he's going before Monarch does, but the Randas protest in favor of going after Hiroshi. After Kate says that they can't stop Godzilla, Shaw reveals that he's trying to help him and vaguely states that if they come with him, they'll know everything. But when they refuse, Shaw leaves with Duval taking Hiroshi's map with him. As May and the Randas make their way towards civilization, May admits that she sold them out to Monarch. She also reveals that a few years prior, she fled to Japan after pissing off the wrong people, and when Monarch found them in Alaska, she made a deal with Duval that if she told them where they'd be, she would be able to go home. And all of this understandably angers Kate and Kentaro. Later at the airport, May is apprehended by mysterious men in suits. Realizing she's missing, Kate and Kentaro scramble to find her and discover that Tim survived the crash. Tim reveals that Monarch was looking for Shaw and was unaware of the deal made with Duval. And to his surprise, the Randas tell him that Hiroshi was out in the desert and wondered if he was trying to wake up Godzilla. But Tim doesn't think so, as Hiroshi spent his whole life trying to prevent G-Day from happening. Kate tells him to prove it, and that if he helps them find May, they'll help Monarch find Shaw. The three team up, and Kate shares that May told her to call her sister if anything happens to her, and asks Tim if he can run a search. He says that he can, but also reveals that when Monarch had them in custody, they ran background searches and found that May's real name is actually Cora. Meanwhile in Alaska, Shaw, Duval, and several rogue Monarch agents have taken over Outpost 88 and take the entirety of the base's explosives with the intention of destroying the Titan portal seen earlier. Tim and the Randas head for Tacoma, Washington to meet with Cora's family in hopes of finding answers of where she might be. Tim suggests they keep their real intentions for finding Cora a secret due to the possibility that she was protecting them from the people who were after her, so they pretend to be online friends who are in town for a convention. However, Cora's sister is visibly suspicious, and when the group leaves, they notice her get into her car and drive away. They follow her to a parking garage in Seattle and find that she lured them there thinking that they work for the company that's after her. When Kentaro assures her that's not the case, she explains that a few years prior, Cora worked for a tech company called AET, and we learn that she was forced to flee the country after she sabotaged their research when she discovered her coding was being used on inhumane testing on chimpanzees. Realizing that AET has her, Tim makes a call and a Titan warning alert is sent throughout the city. Using the ensuing chaos, the group sneaks into AET where Cora is being interrogated by her former boss, Brenda Holland, who has a sneaking suspicion that the Titan alert is a diversion for Tim and the Randas to rescue her. Holland proposes a deal that if Cora reports back to her with everything she finds out about Titans, she'll get a clean slate with AET in exchange. As the group reunites with Cora, she comes clean about her past and how she was just using them to get her old life back. She then tells them that they have to leave and forget about her. Afterwards, the Randas meet up with Verdugo, and Kate offers her the same deal she made Tim, that if Monarch can help get Cora back, she'll lead them to Shaw. Verdugo agrees, and Monarch makes a deal with AET assuring Cora's freedom. And just like that, the gang is back together. Shortly after, with a little convincing from Tim, Verdugo goes live on TV, bringing Monarch out of the shadows and revealing the organization to the world. At the same time, Brenda is on the phone with Walter Simmons discussing AET's rebranding to Apex Cybernetics. Meanwhile, back in Alaska, Shaw and his men set off explosives around the Titan portal, successfully destroying it. At Monarch HQ, Verdugo informs Tim and the Randas that Shaw's detonation wiped out the gamma radiation in Alaska, but as a result caused a massive spike in 12 other locations, and that if he continues, it might cause another G-Day. Unable to rely on Hiroshi's map, the group searches through old Monarch files in Tim's office to try to determine where Shaw will go next. Kate finds a file containing a report on Keiko's death at the power plant in Kazakhstan. Remembering the sentimental way Shaw talked about Keiko and that it was a point on Hiroshi's map, she suspects that Shaw is returning to the site where he lost Keiko in order to get closure. Their hunch turns out to be correct, as Shaw and his men have already returned to the power plant preparing to destroy the Titan portal inside. As the Randas and Korra arrive with Tim and a small Monarch team, they find that the plant is filled with molted exoskeletons of endoswarmers. They explore further and come across the Titan portal with charges set all around it. Suddenly, Duval and the ex-Monarch personnel show up and hold the group at gunpoint. Shaw arrives and takes Kate into a separate room so they can talk privately. He explains that the portals lead to the Titan's world beneath the Earth, and that Godzilla is not a destructive force of nature, but rather he's just trying to keep the Titans in their world. He goes on to reveal that he plans to destroy every portal in order to permanently seal off the Titan's world from the surface to prevent another G-Day, and to make up for losing Keiko. Without warning, he sets off the explosives timer and the power plant begins to shake violently. Korra falls into the portal before a fully grown endoswarmer rises, but debris from the crumbling plant knocks it back down into the portal along with Shaw and Kate. Sometime later, Kentaro wakes up in the hospital where Tim and Verdugo tell him that Kate, Shaw, and Korra are presumed dead. As Korra wakes up in the Hollow Earth, she's grabbed by Shaw and the ground begins to erupt with lethal electric surges. Shaw explains that this is caused by the closing of the rift, and when Korra demands answers, Shaw says that he knows this because he's been there before. He also explains that time works differently and that when he got back to the surface, 20 years had passed, which is why he looks so good for his age. Back at Monarch HQ, Dr. Barnes is analyzing gamma readings and notices a pattern coming from within the Earth, and Tim theorizes that someone is sending a message from within. In Tokyo, Kentaro confronts Hiroshi at his office, informing him of Kate's death, and berates him for not being a good father and keeping secrets from them. Kate then wakes up in the Hollow Earth and comes face to face with a boar-like monster, but before it can attack her, it's shot in the eye with an arrow by Keiko, who is revealed to have survived her fall back in 1959. Back in Tokyo, Hiroshi explains himself, stating that he had been trying to open a rift to the Hollow Earth by luring out a Titan, proving Bill and Keiko's theories correct, and that by doing so could potentially prevent another G-Day from ever happening. He then asks for Kentaro's help in continuing his research and solve the secret to coexistence. Keiko and Kate reunite with Korra and Shaw, who explains to her that it's been over 50 years since she fell in the portal, and that he too went through one in 1962 but managed to escape. He also tells her that Bill has long since died, but Kate assures her that Hiroshi is alive and reveals to her that she's her granddaughter. Meanwhile, Monarch is on high alert due to high gamma readings across the world, and Tim, certain that the group survived, strongly suggests that if they were rescued, they could help Monarch better assess the situation, but Verdugo dismisses him, stating that a possible Titan emergence is top priority. Keiko brings the group to her campsite and shows that she found and reconfigured the gamma simulator from Operation Hourglass to send out signals in hopes of being found. Shaw proposes that if she can set it back to its original configuration, they can use it to get back home, so they make their way to the site where Shaw and his team landed during the operation. In Tokyo, Kentaro arrives at Hiroshi's office with Tim, who has now left Monarch. They show him the gamma signals coming from within the rifts and that they could possibly be coming from Kate. Hiroshi thinks it's impossible, but Kentaro tells him that if he wants his help finishing his journey, then he must first help him find Kate. He then questions how they'll do it, considering Monarch won't help them, but Tim tells him that Monarch isn't their only option. As Shaw's group makes their way to the landing site, we learn that this isn't exactly Hollow Earth after all, but rather a realm between the Hollow Earth and the surface, which Keiko calls Axis Mundi. When they find the landing pod, they begin to put their plan into motion to lure a Titan with the Gamma Simulator and get pulled into an open rift, escaping the same way Shaw did in 1962. As a Titan begins to breach the rift, the Gamma Simulator also lures the Ion Dragon, who is already in Axis Mundi, and it severs the power. The Titan in the rift starts to leave, so Shaw abandons the pod to reconnect the cable. As he gets the power back on, the Titan comes back through, revealing itself to be Godzilla. Thinking he's got plot armor, the Ion Dragon squares up against Godzilla, but ultimately gets his ass kicked. Godzilla kills the Ion Dragon and throws it into the rift, opening it and causing the pod to be pulled through. Keiko tries desperately to pull Shaw back into the pod, but realizing she won't be able to, he sacrifices himself, allowing the others to escape. The pod successfully travels through the rift, and the group are transported back to the surface where they land at an unknown facility. They're met by Kentaro and Hiroshi, and as the mother and son share a tearful reunion, Tim shows up with Brenda, who reveals she funded the rescue operation and that Tim is now working for her. Kentaro tells them that 2 years have passed, but before they can ask any questions, an alarm sounds and thunderous footsteps can be heard, sending the facility into lockdown. We learn that the facility is an Apex research station located on Skull Island, and as the camera pans towards the forest, we get an awesome cameo from none other than Kong himself. Well guys, there it is, a full summary on the MonsterVerse. I know that was a lot to take in, so a big thank you to everyone who stuck around until the end. If we glossed over anything you felt should have been included, let us know in the comments and tell us if you're as hyped for the new Empire as we are. Be sure to give us a follow on Instagram and visit the website for more exciting content. See ya!